Peace. Shalom. Hotep. Welcome back to chapter 22 of Bowls of Fire. The reputable or reputable alchemist. Don't forget the screenshot so you, if you choose, can read along with us. Welcome to Flyball Ferris Wheel 22, the reputable alchemist. An anticipatory system is a natural system that contains an internal predictive model of itself and of its environment, which allows it to change state at an instant in accord with the model's predictions pertaining to a later instant. Robert Rosen, Anticipatory Systems, 1985. This section presents other prominent individuals with knowledge who have caught the home run fly balls of history that were slammed into the stadium of life by ancient Egypt. Today, few people that the mystical alchemical philosopher Stone was some magical substance that turned metal to gold, cured human diseases, and bestowed the individual with power over nature. That's what people used to believe. Yet, reputable alchemists claim the stone possessed all of these attributes. Generally, alchemical activities were kept secret and veiled in all of these attributes. Generally, alchemical activities were kept secret and veiled in codes and riddles. Alchemy was the pastime of Isaac Newton and many other educated individuals who experimented with the stone, the agent of universal transmutation. Again, if Jung's archetypes mirror major motifs in ancient Egyptian myth, Christianity and alchemy can be interpreted as microbiology. Then perhaps the alchemical process that was practiced for centuries is a chemical process similar to isolating and purifying a virus. If so, the profound mystical inner experience that humans describe as spiritual gold or the presence of God may actually be the perception of the non-conscious origin of human intentionality, a bacterial virus. In 2012, Michigan State University researchers Kazem Kashefi and Adam Brown, involved in what they call microbial alchemy, have recreated a process in nature by using a metal-tolerant bacterium called Capriavitis metalloduranens to produce gold nuggets in a glass bioreactor, MSU 2012. Other microbiologists aware that metals had stabilized phage particles are probing the viral metallome by searching for metalloproteins in phage lambda, a virus with high metal binding potential. Actually, the preliminary evidence supports that microbiological methods in modern genetic engineering are identical with the methods of reputable alchemists during the 17th century, such as Isaac Newton and Dr. Michael Meyer, who were also experimenting with metals and microbes in their laboratories. Reflecting a two-sided mirror, alchemy's practitioners aim to transmute base metals into gold while creating spiritual gold. Carl G. Jung supports that alchemy exhibits a double-faced practical lab chemical work and a psychological process. However, alchemy also involves a third aspect that relates directly to its double's face, similar to the modern genetic engineers. The reputable alchemists were actually microbiologists, for in their labs they were inducing transformation in bacteria, a fundamental evolutionary process that also obsessed the pharaonic priesthood, as shown by their funerary literature. Alchemical behavior or microbial experimentation is consistent with the predictions of the ISIS thesis because the same quantum biological message inciting human behavior keeps reoccurring in our history. Put simply, the viral slash bacterial heritage of our genome grounds our psychology and behavior, both conscious and non conscious. Like the ancient Egyptians and early Chinese cultures, the 16th century alchemists were exploring the materia prima, first material, or the metal tolerant heart of an abundant natural creation, the viral bacterial phage. Their quest for the philosopher's stone centered on both chemical and psychological gold. As we shall see, the reputable alchemic process that was practiced for centuries is a chemical process similar to isolating and purifying a virus. It is possible that the materia prima of the reputable alchemist was the genetic regulation network of phage lambda undergoing lytic multiplicities thanks to the lac system in E. coli. In the 17th century, laboratory alchemists armed with microscopes may have recognized the lifestyle of phage lambda as the spiritual goal that resonated with their non-conscious origin of intentionality. They were not only mining spiritual gold, but their own non-conscious origins. They became conscious of their non-conscious and its related heritage of specific signs mirrored by the ritual of alchemical praxis or praxis. A virus was the first material, the origin, the world heart, the lusa, the materia prima of creation, and the reputable alchemists understood this. They were exploring the rapid growth of bacteria while isolating and purifying the viral bacterial phage. Although this seems like a difficult proposition to prove, it is not because the existing alchemical evidence is viewed through the lens of contemporary science. But first, let's examine the idea of isolating and purifying a virus in the interest of learning more about the system of alchemy and its roots that have been buried in what Bald Drillard has called history's dustpan. History of alchemy. Pharaonic Egypt is the mystical homeland of alchemy and the birthplace of its legendary father Hermes Trismegistus. In an attempt to comprehend the Egyptian meaning of the hieroglyphs, the Greeks valued the pictorial and allegorical expression of these abstruse signs as sacred knowledge. Originating in the first centuries of the Common Era, Greeks, Arabs, and later Christian mystics practiced alchemistic symbolic processes that were a blend of psychological and magic and rational science. Even the fundamental concepts of the secret of the golden flower that are connected with Ancient esoteric Chinese teachings reflect a symbolism similar to an alchemical process of refining and ennobling, with darkness giving birth to light and the lead of the water region growing into the noble gold as the non-conscious becomes conscious. Recall that the early Chinese emperors aspired to become stars and Hu and Nazi. 4, section 21, this process is summarized as the growth of ores in earth, vaporization and condensation related to gold, lead, copper, silver, iron. So the Chinese emperor becoming a star in the afterlife via a metal or metallic transformation can be associated with the alchemist's laboratory objective. The diamond body. Jung also mentions another example from the beginning of Hu Ming Qing. The most subtle secret of Tao is essence and life. Jung explains that Tao is composed of the Chinese characters for head and going. Egyptian texts also focus on the way to light the sun god and his, the outcome of transformation. Jung then cites the introductory verse from the Hu Ming Qing. If thou wouldst complete the diamond body without outflowing, diligently heat the roots of consciousness or essence and life, kindle light in the blessed country ever close at hand, and there hidden let thy true self forever dwell. The diamond body or the crystal virus is the root of consciousness, for evidence suggests that Chinese alchemical process of refining and ennobling refers to the isolation and purification of metal binding virus, which is then crystallized as the diamond body without overflowing. An idea that suggests that the virus did not multiply or clone itself through rolling circle replication. It may be helpful to know that in 1898, Martinez Bergerac asserted that the virus was somewhat liquid in nature, calling it contagium vivium fluidum, contagious living fluid. He coined the Latin name virus, meaning poison, for the substance infecting tobacco plants. Yet in 1616, the reputable alchemist Michael Meyer, M.D., wrote Lucius Surius Pastime, a philosophical discourse concerning the superiority of creature under man. Meyer's first-person Latin version is about Mercury, the metal, and creature, liquid at room temperature. And he reads, pulverized with gold or any other body, so it be not corrosive or noxious. I am the best purgative nature hath given. This thus has the name and attribute of Aurelian, and is a panchimagon, a general medicine. By certain processes, i.e., by mixing mercury with certain salts and chlorine, I am turned into a poison called precipitate. Of itself, mercury is an antidote against the plague and other diseases. Like Maya calls Zimmer in A Planet of Viruses in 2011 discusses the ubiquity of bacteriophages in our world, as well as their amazing medicinal properties. For example, the Soviet Union has been using bacteriophage for over a century to treat infections, and Western researchers are now considering phage therapy because the clever bacteria are collectively resisting our antibodies or antibiotics. Both ancient Egypt and early China possessed magnifying glasses, as did 13th century scientists such as Roger Bacon, 1214 to 1294, who is credited with the discovery of the glass lens in 1268 for eyeglasses. Roger Bacon developed a theory of the multiplication of species and successive generation of light. According to historian David C. Lindbergh, Bacon believed a species is elicited in the recipient out of potentiality that already exists there. Bacon had access to the works of Avisbron, died circa 1058, who describes a force, vis, ray, radius, or lightness species emanating from the first maker, citing his translation of Bacon's Perspectiva in 1996 and De Multiplication Spierum in 1983. Lindbergh describes Bacon's production of the species of light in the first part of the air, contagious to the second part, and so on, the generation multiplying according to the dimensions of the air. This sounds like Bacon was creating copies of DNA through the polymerase chain reaction that involves 4 steps: denaturation, extension, insertion of gene, amplification of the inserted gene into hundreds of millions of copies. Lindbergh mentions Bacon's argument that this generation can occur along straight, reflected, refracted, twisting, and accidental lines. In Perspectiva in 1266, Bacon explained that the twisting path for transmission of the species occurs by the power of the soul. Lindbergh also discusses Bacon's idea on stronger perpendicular passage of a species on a transparent interface versus the easier oblique passage, as well as the images produced by the reflection and refraction of light on a mirror surface. These explanations support microscopic curved black hole dynamics relative to the inner axial horizon acting like a holographic mirror. Of course, curved black hole dynamics are similar to lambda protein folding landscapes. Now, Roger Bacon also practiced alchemy, and he was regarded as one of the first advocates of the scientific method. He also wrote Speculum Alchemiae, the Mirror of Alchemy, which was produced later in 1597. By the 16th century, alchemy had peaked during the so-called scientific revolution. During the late 1500s, the first microscope was developed in England, and it was capable of observing bacteria and single-cell animals. In 1597, Zacharias Janssen and his son Hans Janssen made further advances to the microscope, inventing the compound microscope that was modified later in the 17th century by Robert Hooke. By 1625, the microscope was used throughout Europe, and papers were published such as Robert Hooke's Micrographia and Marcello Malfighi's proof of William Harvey's blood circulation theories in 1660. In 1676, Anton van Leeuwenhoek, a Dutch microscope maker, observed and described what he called animalcules, that is, protozoa and bacteria in pond water, rainwater, and human saliva. Okay. In 1677, he described human and insect spermatozoa. In light of scientific knowledge during the 17th century, it does not seem unreasonable that alchemists were attempting to imitate the generation of metals in nature. However, early modern alchemists were secretive about their works, so this science was for the privileged person, as it was in ancient Egypt and early China. Sir Isaac Newton, 1643 to 1727. In an alchemical manuscript entitled Manna, Newton explains alchemy. For alchemy does not trade with metals as ignorant vulgars think, which error has made them distrust the noble science, but she has also material veins, of those of whose nature God created handmaidens to conceive and bring forth its creatures. Quoted in White, 1998, 139 to 1 to 40 from KCL Keynes, MS 33, verse 5. Along with the quest of transmutation of metals from the early 1670s to the mid 1690s, Isaac Newton explored the composition and structure of matter, investigating the mysteries of alchemical transformation by the means of alchemical experiments. In Babson College Library in Massachusetts, Babson, Newton writes, Artephius tells us that his fire dissolves and gives life to stones, and word deleted Pontanus that their intelligible words fire is not transmuted with their matter because it is not of matter, but turns it with all its species into the elixir, which deserves well to be considered. For this is the best explication of their saying that the stone is made of one only thing. Quoted in White, 1998, page 250. Although biographer Michael White believes that these were the words of a man on edge of madness, species is a legitimate area of research for early alchemists as well as modern genetic engineers because it is the homeland of E. coli bacterium with its inert phage lambda. Recall that when the phage is active, it produces numerous phage progeny. White then includes another excerpt from the same treatise by Newton, who achieved multiplication like his predecessor Roger Bacon during the 13th century. Thus you can multiply each stone 4 times and no more, for they will and then become oil shining in the dark and fit for magical use. You may ferment it with gold by keeping them in a fusion for a day, then project upon metals. This is the multiplication in quality. You may multiply it in quantity by the mercuries of which you made it at first. Amalgamating the stone with the mercury of 3 or more eagles and adding their weight of the water. And if you design it for metals, you may melt every time 3 parts of gold and 1 of the stone. Every multiplication will increase its virtue 10 times. If you use the 2D and 3D rotation without the spirits, perhaps 1,000 times, thus you may multiply to infinity. Regarding Newton's coded message, multiplication indicates amplification of DNA, and old, shiny, and dark suggests bio or chemiluminescence. When Newton died, copies of 9 publications by the influential German alchemist Michael Meyer were in his library, one of which was Meyer's Secretoris Nature Secretorum Scrutatium Chymicium, Frankfurt, 1687. For example, stages in the manufacture and purification of the philosopher's stone involve the transformation of a so-called black lead into a pure white substance, as well as this substance's further refinement through heating of metals in tall laboratory crucibles. Citing works of Arabic alchemists Gerber and Rhazes, Meyer refers to a series of amalgamations of lead, tin, and other metallic compounds, as well as discussing the chemical process of washing away feces. Meyer's Secretoris Nature Secretorum Scrutium Chimicium was an incomplete 1687 reprint of Atlantia Fuegians. The text aspired to justify alchemy with rationalism and an interest of Newton's due to his enthusiasm for alchemy. Many alchemists were charlatans, but still others were reputable, such as Robert Boyle, who believed it was possible to transmute base metals into gold. In 1680, he stated that there exists concealed in the world of a much higher order, able to transmute baser metals into perfect ones. Perhaps he is referring to the metallic binding power of a higher ordered bacteria phase, such as a phase lambda, with its transition metal composition. According to Michael White, 1998, in the Optics, Newton described his experiment in 1664 related to refraction, reflection, rainbow interference, and the behavior of mirrors and prisms. Newton speculates that light operates like gravitation via forces acting at a distance. Recall Dr. Montagne's experiments where he copies DNA fragments at a distance, for the DNA is located at a short distance away from creation of copies using a PCR medium. Perhaps Newton and Montagnier were conducting similar experiments at a distance of 400 years apart. Dr. Montagnier's breakthrough is that he copies DNA fragments at a distance without adding the DNA fragment into the PCR medium. What Dr. Montagnier has shown is that the shadow of DNA, where that DNA is located at a short distance away, is enough to create copies of that DNA in a PCR medium. Unaware of 20th century microbiological researcher Michael White concludes, if we are to appraise alchemy in the cold, clear light of the late 20th century, we should acclaim it for giving the world some useful tools and techniques still used in modifying form, and most significantly, for inspiring a train of thought in at least one great philosopher of the 17th century. With that, we should be content. To show the limitations of White's modern view of alchemy and to test the proposition that the alchemical process involved a chemical process of isolating and purifying a higher order virus, we must compare alchemy with modern genetic engineering. We are at the end of chapter 22 of Balls of Fire. Please tune in with me next time with chapter 23 of Balls of Fire, called Alchemy's Viral Goal. The next one will be Flyball Ferris Wheel 23. Thank y'all for coming out. God bless you. Good night.